Oh, welcome into the Damage Report. It's Adrienne Lawrence, and I'm excited to be here, especially because we have so much incredible news. And as you know, I'm filling in for John Iadarola. And of course, I am not doing it alone, but also I'm joined by the great Brett Erlich.
I'm great? Yes, I don't think I've ever been great before. Loud, annoying, a little too much to deal with, but never great. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, I do like to use creative language, so I don't take it to heart. I don't want you getting, high self-esteem because, I live on the thought of, making sure I can hold certain men down. And that would be you because you are great. Yeah. It happens. Well, I could definitely tell you all that we want to hear your comments because we don't want to hold you down. We want you to go ahead, check out the podcast, make sure you like, follow, stay in the feed because we've got a lot to say and we want to hear from you. But there is someone that we heard from last night that we really didn't want to, and that would be maybe a former president. Yeah, because last night was one really for the history books. A former president had his mugshot taken for the very first time. Here it is. It was blasted on the cover of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Repping Atlanta there, where Donald Trump surrendered in Fulton County to the authorities yesterday. He surrendered in connection with his efforts to reverse his 2020 presidential election loss there in Georgia. Now, former President Trump reportedly only spent about 20 minutes at the jail, really getting fingerprinted and having his mug captured by the cameras. We know this per the New York Times. But the process was faster than for most defendants. Minutes after he entered the jail, Mr. Trump's record appeared in Fulton County's booking system, which listed him as having blonde or strawberry hair, a height of 6 feet, 3 inches, and a weight of 215 pounds. 24 pounds less than the White House doctor reported Mr. Trump weighing in 2018. That's interesting. It's like he's getting healthier and taller since he left office. Oh, that's just speaks to his magic. Well, Trump apparently, as far as we're all concerned, he was allowed to self-report his height and his weight, which is a bummer because I would have walked him up there on that scale itself. Get at least some truth out of the man. And although he could fudge those numbers, the former president, he couldn't alter the 13 felony charges that he's currently facing. As you can see here from the docket report in Atlanta's Fulton County Jail, they were listing all those 13 charges among his 18 other co-defendants in that RICO case that he is facing now in connection with trying to overturn the election results there in Georgia. It is really a historic day. And although we couldn't get the truth of his height and his weight, I think maybe the reality of truth setting in is something that he should be feeling at this point in time. Brett, do you think that now that he's had a mugshot, he's been fingerprinted and treated like the criminal I'd arguably say he is, do you think any of this is coming home for Donald Trump?
The fact that okay, so I don't think Donald Trump will necessarily suffer any additional consequences by having the mugshot out versus not having the mugshot out, by having a 5th indictment versus a 4th indictment. A lot of people are pretty set. The only thing, like at this point, it has tipped the scales, in my opinion, from there's some people that don't follow politics and haven't really thought about Trump, and maybe they'll forget some stuff. That's gone. I think all the normies out there are gonna be like, ugh, Trump is just too much anyway. As to whether it'll change his behavior at all going forward, or if he'll make any adjustments to what he talks about and how he talks about it. No, the guy told everybody he was 215 pounds. There's no way that a guy like that who's 6'3", so that is the true part. He's at least 6'2", 6'3"-ish. There is no way that guy only weighs 215 pounds. If he does, congratulations. And I always wonder when he does sit down interviews and his butt like does this weird shelf thing. Now I know that it's either his body, or in this case, if he's actually weighing himself and it says 215, those might just be helium balloons in his butt.
Okay, so first of all, I completely disagree with you. I do not think he's anywhere near 6'3". What Obama is like, what, 6'1", 6'2". I just don't think Trump is towering him in any capacity. And anytime he does show up as 6'3", as far as I'm concerned, he's got the Tom Cruise lifts in his shoes. He's out here with Robert Downey Jr. like little plugs, put it in. I just don't think the man is 6'3". It's not happening. As far as his weight goes, I am going to defer to you. When I look at all of this in terms of height and weight, which is just the most petty part of it in terms of his booking, but I'm okay. I'll prance and petty all day long. But as far as I'm concerned, this is the equivalent of a dating profile. The man saying he's taller than he is and weighs less than he is. So we think he's fitter than he is when really he's not fit for anything, including to serve in the presidency. Now, although Trump can't really do anything about the 13 charges he's facing, even if he can do something about the height and weight as far as what's recorded in Atlanta, well, the former president, he is definitely doing his damnedest to try to stave off an October trial date. Yeah, October, just in a few months, because that's really what's on the table right now. And that's in part because of his co-defendant, Kenneth Chesebro. Here's a picture of him, a gentleman also tied up in the effort to find those extra votes Trump wanted. Well, lawyers for Kenneth Chesebro on Wednesday filed a motion demanding a speedy trial in the sweeping election interference racketeering prosecution of former President Donald Trump and his allies. And this is a very aggressive approach, I will tell you. Chesebro is a lawyer himself. And what his attorneys are doing in this instance, as far as I'm concerned strategically, is they're pressuring Fani Willis and her team of prosecutors to come to trial immediately and now. Because Chesebro isn't a main character in any way, there's a good chance that Fani Willis's team there in Georgia are not fully prepared to litigate this case right now. Because demanding a trial, a speedy trial, which is something that a defendant is entitled to request under Georgia state law, demanding that speedy trial is in October is 4 months before Fani Willis actually wanted to prosecute it. So saying, I want this case done now, that puts Fani Willis's team in a not so awesome situation where they have to be ready to prosecute it in just a few months. And so it's the hope of really destabilizing the prosecution by making them go to trial right now in October. And so in response to this aggressive filing from Chesebro, well, the Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, she went ahead and asked the court, let's go ahead and do this. Let's do this, but let's do it for all 19 defendants. On October 23rd. It's her thought of it, if you're gonna try to destabilize me and my prosecution team, I'm gonna destabilize all of you all and force you to go to trial in the here and now this year. And of course, Trump is none too pleased, as we know that man loves to delay. This per the Hill. Former President Trump opposed an effort to move the trial for his election interference case in Georgia up to October, asking to sever his case from that of a co-defendant who asked for a speedy trial, being Chesebro. Trump is facing numerous upcoming court dates. A March 25th trial date is set in Trump's New York hush money case, and a May 20 date is set for the federal case probing his handling of classified documents. Yeah, so at this point, Trump is in a position where he has a lot of case dates coming up. He does not want this to be starting trial in October, and he's going to want to delay. Particularly, he's going to try to get it to a date that'll be after, after we have those elections for president. I don't necessarily think that the court will be down for that, but we know at this point the court's approved the October trial date, but just for Chesebro at this point. So Brett, how does this sound to you in terms of having these co-defendants almost part ways, split up, sever the trial because they don't want to be tried in the next few months, whereas they want to delay.
Right, it's not better late than never. If you're a defense attorney, it's better late than ever. We would never want it to happen. Keep it going past any, so that it just you don't want to go to jail. If you're on the opposition to Trump, your political decision making would probably not care if it happens before or after the election. You just want to keep getting this stuff in the news so people are reminded that he's on trial. The worst thing that could happen for you is if you oppose Trump, you're trying to make it work for you politically, and then he gets found not guilty. before the election and everything, then he can say I'm completely exonerated. The ideal thing for me politically, I think, would be to set all the trial dates before the election, have Trump actively try to delay them until after the election, and then you get to keep printing this headline, Trump keeps asking for delay of justice. If you're Trump, you definitely want to delay. It's not hurting you any more than it already has. If I have to choose which one I want to have happen before the election, I don't care about the hush money stuff. I think that's annoying, but it's like, it's also like the one that most people can say is like ticky tack. It's like, that's his own personal business. I think if you're a Trump fan, you're just like, I don't know why I would care that he gave hush money to someone who, like, a lot of people used to pay money to watch have sex. Like, cool. The other thing, the only one that I think needs to happen before the election, if anything, and the only one that I think actually has importance to the United States of America, is this Fulton County case. Is the case where he is actively calling the Secretary of State of Georgia and asking the guy to find votes that don't exist, that he knows doesn't exist. Everybody says he knew didn't exist, but even if they did exist somewhere, that is not how you call someone up and ask them essentially for a favor. So that's my take on kind of the lay of the land with all these looming prosecutions and shifting trial dates, some of which have already been delayed.
Yes, and we know Trump loves to delay. I just find it very interesting that these 19 co-defendants, they're all going to be acting in their own individual interests. So we're going to see a lot of motions, a lot of requests, and it's going to be strategic. I can tell you that the Fulton County DA's office has its work cut out for them. And Fani Willis definitely has her work cut out for her, because now another wrench has been thrown in her prosecution, a la Jim Jordan. Yeah, this gentleman here, Jim, loves to go ahead and bother people, and he just launched a probe on Fani Willis, and he's demanding now info on whether or not she coordinated with federal officials, because of course, him being part of the federal government, that would only be his jurisdiction there. In terms of sending her a letter, which harkens from when he also sent the Manhattan DA a letter. This letter states, Ms. Willis's indictment and prosecution implicate substantial federal interests, and the circumstances surrounding her actions raise serious concerns about whether such actions are politically motivated. Given the weighty federal interests at stake, the committee is conducting oversight of this matter to determine whether any legislative reforms are appropriate or necessary. Now, this investigation into Willis isn't the first time Jordan demanded information related to a Trump indictment, as we all remember what he did with the district attorney there in New York. It definitely seems that Jim Jordan does not fully appreciate the whole separation of powers, the whole state government things, as well as an ongoing investigation, and the fact that this indictment and the investigation of it at the state level was really a reflection of the people of Georgia. It wasn't Fani Willis out here doing her recklessness. This is what a grand jury in Georgia, as in we the people, wanted when they went ahead and issued those grand jury indictments. Brett, what do you think about this? More federal actors really abusing their power to try to add more to the plate of these state prosecutors who are defending their states and the rights of the citizens there.
When you say add more to the plate, I love that analogy, because it really does feel like I'm at a buffet and I get to choose like what way to attack Jim Jordan. Like, Jim Jordan is the exact guy who would say, if there was an investigation into a Republican, he'd say, why are you guys out there right now trying to waste taxpayer money to do these investigations? Millions of dollars to happen every day. What is that? That's not a miscarriage of justice if I ever saw one. And that's one attack, is the blatant hypocrisy. He thinks that there should be no investigations against Republicans and only investigations against people who are put in place by Democratic voters, period. That's it. And he doesn't think that any Democratic vote should count anyway, which is, I guess that's some kind of value system at play that's somewhat coherent. But I think that Jim Jordan is specifically, like, this kind of thing is so Jim Jordan annoying. This guy is fighting tooth and nail to stop justice from happening. And then he's just so like, when you see the guy, Jim Jordan's affect is that guy they send you to at the car dealership after you think you finished the deal. And he's up there with his sleeves all rolled up and he's like, let me talk to you about financing options. You gotta get the true coat. Let me just talk to you really fast. Hopefully, basically I wear you down and I just take enough of your time. You're like, I'll sign anything, get the hell out of here. That's Jim Jordan. And he's so annoying that you forget that the guy is actually at the heart of like huge sexual harassment and assault scandals at the University of Ohio, the Ohio State University, when he was a wrestling coach there. Like he is the most concentrated ball of annoying. I don't know how to criticize him in this specific scenario and call out how ridiculous he is, because he's ridiculous in so many freaking ways.
The crazy thing is, I think I read a while ago how Jim Jordan has not passed any legislation over his entire time in Congress. And the thing that gets me is that those Ohio voters continue to put him in a position of power. It just makes me think like the intellectual capacity of those who have the opportunity to vote on him may not be the strongest, but it's also very much a reflection of the United States of America. And also one of the reflections of the US is Rudy Giuliani. Apparently he likes the idea of being arrested. Maybe not necessarily the whole ordeal, but Rudy really thought that the people out there in terms of the Atlantic County Jail, that those people were pro him, were backing him. It's weird, watch.
It's all of 20 minutes, so it's not an extensive period of time. But the point that I'm making is you're surrounded by prisoners. Now, that can be extremely intimidating. In my case, they were reporting for me. And I think it was legitimate, I couldn't tell. They were yelling out rather familiar campaign slogans that go back to my campaigns for mayor. So I have to assume, which doesn't say much for my city, that a lot of them may have been New Yorkers. It was like a rally.
Oh my God, like I'm just, what world does a man live? What planet? What? Brett, I'm gonna go ahead and toss to you.
I love this. This is like so hilariously Uncle Rudy. Like Rudy doesn't really exist in our reality anymore. This is a guy who had so much success and so many people backing him. He was on the cover of Time magazine, America's mayor. The guy is the reason that organized crime in New York City just got obliterated when he was locking up the mafia. Like this guy was the highest highs. This guy is like in The Sopranos, they're like mentioning all the great things he did in the show The Sopranos, from a legal perspective, and how far he's fallen. Like the guy is so unmoored that he thinks that people at the jail who were clapping from him and being like, "Make America great again, buddy." These same people that are like, you know, when you talk about the justice system locking people up for little nothings, and then they just stay in jail because they have records, and then it's a slippery slope that it's very difficult to get out, or a terrible cycle that it's very difficult to get out of. A lot of people, especially that came from New York to Florida, those people started that cycle because of Rudy Giuliani. Do you think they're really stoked that this guy's out there? Maybe they're just clapping for him because A, he's horrible and they're doing it ironically, or B, they think he's a TV star. They don't know any of his history. They think he's a movie star because he was in the most recent Borat movie.
Yeah, I really don't know what's going on. If the clapping was something that Rudy heard in his head, or or if he's like kind of peddling this kind of just the Trump mentality of let me go ahead and say something that will appear to boost my ego. But I think the reality is clear that Rudy Giuliani is an absolute fool, and also he's a broke ass fool. Like that man has run his entire legacy and his bank account into the ground to the point where he's begging Trump to help pay for his legal fees. it's incredibly sad how far he's fallen. But then again, when you start by way of marrying your cousin, I can't imagine that you're going to have a significantly grand future ahead. I really just feel like the real Rudy Giuliani caught up with him, and now it just has him in a chokehold. So whether he's hearing clapping for the rest of his life, I really don't know. I don't care, but I'm glad he has his mugshot, and I hope he faces consequences for his behavior. Yeah, and I love all of these, all of them. Oh, it's beautiful. It's not as beautiful as some celebrity mugshots I've seen, but it really just makes you. And also, wait, I don't even know the woman who is what is she, a daywalker?
Which one? The one on the top left is Sidney Powell.
The one who's translucent.
Oh yeah, the albino here. I don't know.
Yes. Who that?
I don't. That's the only one I don't know. Because from the top, you've mentioned the guy in the bottom left. Top left is Sidney Powell. Top right is Jen Ellis. I'm not sure she knows why she's there. And then bottom right, this I don't know if people are familiar, but David Letterman did have a child with Conan O'Brien, and this is him. And he aged too fast. He's in jail. It's not so great. The last thing I'll say about this is, so Rudy. Do you know what Rudy's wife's name is?
Rudette? I don't know. What is it?
Close. Judy. Rudy and Judy Giuliani.
Now, was this the cousin?
I think so. I don't know. He has had so many wives, which is definitely, I don't care that they have a lot of wives, but neither do the people who say that marriage is like this one man, one woman till death do us part thing. And they still embrace these folks as like the moral backbone of America, which doesn't make any sense to me.
You know what? And sidebar, when you think of all of his wives, because he has like 3 or 4, I'm sure they probably end up keeping the Giuliani name, thinking it was something, grand or worthwhile to have. And now it's just an absolute embarrassment. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a them issue. But we know, as far as things concerned, that they're really not getting any of their back alimony because that man ain't got no money. But we do have plenty of time to hear from you all, so let's go ahead and head to break.
All right, Adrienne, you got it.
All right, thank you so much, Brad, always handling it. And I will note, we were not attacking him for his height, we're attacking him for lying about his height. Very different things. And someone who did make some attacks because others were lying was Christie, and he did that during the debates on Wednesday. But following up, he went after GOP presidential rival Vivek Ramaswamy. He went ahead and took him down on Thursday while discussing the Fox News debates the night before. Watch.
The most professional politician to be scared of on that stage last night is a guy who would baselessly accuse all of us of having sold out the American people. I've never profited a dime off of my public service and never will. And for him to say it was unfair, and that's why I jumped in at that point and I interrupted and called him an amateur. He can't even remember what he's plagiarizing any longer. He uses that, phrase, a skinny guy with an odd name who doesn't belong on this stage. Well, it came right out of Barack Obama's acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention. And he uses the very same phraseology. I mean, this is a guy who has, no principle.
Yeah, Christie came for Ramaswamy, who did say during the Wednesday debate that their field for GOP contenders for the presidential spot had been bought and paid for. And as you can hear from Christie, he was none too pleased to hear that kind of accusation. Now, Brett, I do think a lot of the GOP candidates for president have been bought and paid for. I don't necessarily know about Christie, but then again, he may be in the race specifically to take down Trump. But it makes you wonder, who's economically incentivizing him to spend his money and time on a presidential race that he can't win just so he can be the one to call Trump names? Makes me wonder.
Listen, The only person who's not doing a sad Trump impression on that stage really is Christie. He's the only one who stands up to Trump and goes like, "You're in it." And then Asa Hutchinson does it, but he's not very well known. He's not very charismatic. It doesn't really ring true. Nikki Haley is just kind of empty generally, since she tucked tail and took a job from Trump in a cabinet post after trying periodically to stand up to him and then stopping. But Christie, who tried to help Trump with his transition team, to be fair, and was the chief of that transition team and was the first to endorse Trump. That's really, since then, he has kind of taken the lane of the person who's gonna punch back and punch hard. And the people that he does need to punch first, since Trump isn't gonna share a debate stage with him until the season finale, he's basically playing Kim Cattrall in the And Just Like That reboot of, Morons in the City. But yeah, so Christie has to knock out Vivek Ramaswamy as he's doing this weird Trump / Elon Musk impression, and he does a good job. He doesn't let Vivek get away with it. But yeah, Christie, he's a super PAC guy, right? I mean, and he's a dude who loves that spotlight. He's a dude who loves to go on the Sunday shows. He's the one who loves to lock arms with Rahm Emanuel and do-si-do on network news every Sunday, because he really is the only other person who can be kind of like a hard ass other than Trump on that stage, and people believe it who have known him for a while.
Yeah, I think Christie is the only one on that stage on Wednesday night that I actually have some respect for. But for him to pretend that he's not getting funding from a particular group that has a particular agenda, which is someone who will speak truth about Trump, I think it's just an utter farce and a lie. And that's the reality of these GOP contenders, that they are bought and paid for, that there is someone who is sponsoring them and paying for their presidential campaign because there is a particular agenda that they have there. But for Ramaswamy to pretend that he is not among them as well is just as equally disingenuous. Either way, I really don't know that it's going to help them. Brett, did you have something you wanted to say real quick?
Yeah, just like Christie has a super PAC that gave him $6 million, according to reports. The person who is really like the super PAC darling, though, it seems like it's going to be, as Jim Carville said once, the single biggest act of masturbation in history was to give, there's been $130.6 million after the mid-year report for super PACs that went to Ron DeSantis. So 130, that's the guy that when you say is bought and paid for, it's absolutely DeSantis, who folks were thinking would be like the guy who most embodies the Republican Party that the elites want, because the elites, they'll take Donald Trump because he didn't really fundamentally change anything negatively for them. The rich got richer under Trump. He's just the one who can seem to placate the populist feeling base. But Ron DeSantis is the one that they would rather have because they feel they can control DeSantis more, because he really is just like your old Republican doing a horrible ass impression of Donald Trump, like all the way down to the hand movements.
It's funny, well, now at least on social media, it seems to be that Ron DeSantis is actually doing a Homelander impression, according to millions, in terms of the boys, where he's awkward and in terms of his movements, can't force a smile and is weird to be around. And it makes you wonder, like, what is going on with this man? Because DeSantis, he doesn't have any charisma whatsoever. And his attempts to kind of replicate Trump, it just makes him look even worse as far as I'm concerned. And he's tanking, it's not helpful. But it seems to be helping Trump because he's still leading in the Republican primary polls with 58% of the vote, and DeSantis sitting at 14%. I don't even know who that 14% is, but they lied to themselves. The votes must be coming from Florida. Maybe DeSantis's mama put that up. But essentially, when asked about a second choice candidate, though, DeSantis does have 33% of the vote for the GOP contender, the nominee for president. So it's disheartening. It is weird, but at the same time, all of this talk isn't helping anybody but Trump. But you know who does definitely need help out there, who'd love to align herself with Trump, is Lauren Boebert. And it turns out that people aren't really here for her. Who would have really thought? Yeah, new polls show that Lauren Boebert, what is our Oregon sweetheart, losing re-election or Colorado. They're all kind of the same states to me. They're not California. Well, the new polls are showing that Boebert is losing re-election as the majority of her district doesn't like her. The poll showed that 50% of likely voters in the district say they will vote for Frisch, who almost beat Boebert in 2022 in the purple district, and only 48% say they're voting for Boebert. Now, Frisch holds a bigger advantage, 17 points, when it comes to unaffiliated voters, the group that the Frisch campaign has said it's trying to appeal to in this election cycle. He also has a 32-point advantage with Latin voters. Now, a majority, 53% of likely voters in the survey had an unfavorable view of Boebert, and only 42% had a favorable view of her. 34%. They thought Frisch was pretty dope. 26% thought he wasn't as awesome. Now in 2022, Frisch ran a campaign as a moderate Democrat against Boebert, who stood out opposing queer equality and rights and a variety of controversial opinions. And the thing is Frisch came pretty close to beating her, only losing by 551 votes. And if you all remember, wasn't a fan of how quickly he bowed out as opposed to challenging and having a recount. But then again, whatever that issue is, that is his issue. But hopefully there will be, maybe a different count in the next election. Brett, what do you think is really incentivizing this change of heart from those in, where are we, Colorado? Yeah.
I love this so much. Like, she is staring off the cliff of she's staring, this is it. The metaphor is she's staring off the top of the Tower of Babel that she has scrambled up in her hubris to become a god. And down at the bottom of the crevasse is Madison Cawthorn's shattered remains. Someone who got so annoying, and because the media landscape incentivizes you to be the most shrill voice, the most annoying person, and it's just like how it must be at Thanksgiving dinner. These people go out and they try to make their fortune, and back home their family hates the crap out of them. And so when that happens, people of Rifle, Colorado have become so embarrassed by Lauren Boebert and her insanity. They just don't want that kind of negative attention on them, that they're gonna vote for a Democrat in what should be an insanely red district. And if that happens, I mean, he didn't get any support the last go around. There was no money from the National Party going to him because they thought he didn't have a snowball's chance in hell. But as we found out, he was within a tiny margin, a totally recountable margin of Lauren Boebert, and he backed out. But this is not a Senate seat where you're up every 6 years. This is a House of Representatives seat where you're up every 2 years, and she could go the way of Madison, and that is into her second childishness and mere oblivion.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if the voters there are just kind of tired of her antics, and you would have thought that they would have been tired in the last election. But hey, it was only 550 votes by which she won. So it tells you that there were people getting hip to the game. I just wonder at what point now has made it cross the threshold where they are truly in the game. If it's a matter of more people saying, hey, it was only 550 votes, that means every vote does count. I really do need to step up this time and actually vote. Or if it's a matter of Boebert is asinine and possibly more powerful in Congress, and things like her little fight with Marjorie Taylor Greene on the House floor, that is making people say, you know what, this isn't a good look for our district. And so we want a different voice representing us. I really don't necessarily know where they're going with that, but I think it'll be interesting to see how things go in terms of moving forward. But any closing thoughts, Brett?
No, I can't wait. I cannot wait to see what happens. It's gonna be fantastic if she loses, because I just don't see any, like, the people who love Lauren Boebert probably got out there so they could just love and vote for Lauren Boebert. The only real thing she has going for her is that it was an off year and not all the Trumpers were out in full of force, so we'll see.
Yes, and I also kind of wonder if voters are not the biggest fan of her stepping away from these traditional notions of womanhood by way of getting a divorce. the domestic violence issues with her son. It is more unfortunate in terms of the reasons why they're like, no, it's okay. We don't really need her. Who knows?
We were with her when her husband was showing his pecker to teens at the bar. Yeah. But now that she divorced him, well, God hates that.
Exactly. This is something the Lord isn't here for, and we can't get behind a woman like that. So we're going to go ahead and move on. Definitely wouldn't be surprised, but you never know. But there are full of surprises, and we cannot wait to hear from you all, because I think we're going to go to another set of comments. Yeah, a new report is showing that the CEOs of the top 100 companies are paying the lowest wages. Yeah, the lowest wages made on average of $601 for every $1 earned by the average worker. That was last year in terms of executive compensation records, as we saw that in the C-suite, well, the income continued to climb to record highs. We know this per The Guardian. The Institute for Policy Studies singles out which 100 companies in the S&P 500 pay their workers the least. Companies the report dubs the low-wage 100. These companies pay their employees, including workers outside of the US and part-time workers, a median wage of $31,672 in 2022, while their CEOs took home an average of $15.3 million. Many of these companies also invest millions each year in stock buybacks when a company buys shares of its own stock as a way to boost stock prices and give more money to shareholders. Of the low-wage 190 companies conducted stock buybacks, spending a collective $341.2 billion buying their own shares from January 2020 to May 2023. Now, this report, which is unfortunately not shocking, but it is very bothersome. Well, it highlights the companies that really stood out in the group, of course, including those with the highest paid CEOs and the largest stock buyback. Are you ready for this? Live Nation CEO Michael Rapino had the largest compensation of the group, raking in $139 million in 2022. Meanwhile, the median pay for the company last year was $25,000. Of the companies that had stock buybacks, Lowe's spent the most, dedicating almost $35 billion to its own shares over the last 3 years. Lowe's CEO Marvin Ellison had a compensation of $17.5 million in 2022, while the median worker pay was $30,000. Last I checked, I think that's below the poverty line. Either way, it's not something a lot of people can live on, and nor should they if they're particularly working full-time jobs, while their CEOs are working what, super yachts? Now, Sarah Anderson, the report's lead author, said that the highlights here are that it's highlighting a massive problem with corporate America. So she said this is a really hard data that reinforces what is the major story in corporate America. Instead of investing in their workforce or investment to be competitive, in the long term, they've been putting out huge sums to enrich their CEOs and their shareholders. These are sums that workers at these companies could not even wrap their minds around. Oh my goodness, Brett, let's just pause there and kind of take it in before we talk about potential ways to maybe curb this. But it just seems like the wage gap, it is getting even worse. And it's in part because we're seeing efforts like this where employees are not being paid a living wage, and yet CEOs are filling their coffers without regard at all.
Yeah, I love that Live Nation their CEO is like the poster boy for this kind of stuff, because that's something that really embodies why the corporate structure in America has gone insane and how. So Live Nation, I don't know if this is the Live Nation CEO or the Live Nation Entertainment CEO, but there was essentially, and if they're different, but Live Nation and Ticketmaster merged and created Live Nation Entertainment. And as we all know, we love our Taylor Swift. We love going to concerts now that everybody's kind of crawling out from after COVID to try their hand at whether they will get sick at a live event. But everybody knows that that's like the worst experience. The CEO makes his money by making our lives as the consumer miserable and more expensive, not because they have a superior product, but because they seize and form a barrier between you and the thing you want to do, and then just try to milk as much money out of you as possible, not by making it better or doing any kind of competition, but by merging, eliminating the competition, creating essentially a monopoly on live events, and then raking in money as a reward for making life miserable. And a lot of these companies end up needing assistance anyway. So they say that this is a free market that we live in. It's not, because what ends up happening is the CEOs pay their employees less than a living wage. And because those employees make less than a living wage, those employees then, gainfully employed people who have been told to get a job, loser, they get a job, that job doesn't pay enough, and then they have to go on government assistance, which means that every bit of business that Live Nation and all these top 100 lowest paying CEO companies do, all of that, they're getting paid a ton of money, and that's being subsidized by you and me, the taxpayer. Something that a lot of us complain about. A lot of them, more specifically, loudly complain about. And then, the line is, it's rugged individualism for the poor and socialism for the rich. This list absolutely proves that. Most of these companies get government subsidies that make it so that their CEOs can get these golden parachutes when they leave, and champagne and caviar dreams while they're still in their jobs.
Yes, and it's so incredibly sad, because we see this happen again and again and again. And this whole living wage thing, it's a thought that this is something that you cannot attain. And so you end up with individuals having to take on multiple jobs, also individuals having to take on multiple debt so that they can really keep their heads afloat. And the thing is it's not sustainable. So you have to ask yourself, at what point does the federal government have to get involved? And so we know this from Common Dreams. IPS found that 51 of the companies in the low wage 100, including Amazon, FedEx, and Johnson Controls, received a combined 24.1 billion worth of federal contracts between fiscal years 2020 and 2023, potentially giving the federal government leverage to force the companies to rein in out of control executive compensation and stock buybacks. As part of a menu of proposed policy solutions, IPS urged President Biden's administration to give federal contractors that don't repurchase their own shares priority in the awarding of subsidies and grants, a move that would build on a policy the US Commerce Department enacted last year for semiconductor subsidies. The group also called on federal lawmakers to pass legislation to impose higher taxes on companies with yawning gaps between CEO and worker pay. In 2021, Senator Bernie Sanders proposed a bill that would have hiked taxes on large corporations that pay their top executives over 50 times more than their median workers. Absolutely, you would think that that is the bare minimum that the federal government could do to try to rein in a lot of this disparity in pay, knowing that it's not sustainable for the United States in the long run. But unfortunately, we don't have a government that operates to serve the people as opposed to serve corporations. Brett, any last closing things or words on this?
Just those gaps. There's so many gaps in America that are really indicators that the system is out of control, and that wage gap between CEOs and the average employee is a huge one. That is a giant indicator, and that gap has gotten larger and larger over time. And I think a lot of people, there's this weird argument that right wingers who are corporatists make. They're like, listen, if you make it more expensive for me to run my business, I'm gonna hire fewer people and I'm gonna find some other thing to do with my life. I call BS. They're there because they wanna make the most money possible. If we throttle how much the highest amount possible is, they're still gonna try to achieve that by some means or another. They're gonna find some way or some loophole around the system, and we just have to keep closing those loopholes.
Absolutely, something more needs to be done, because again, it's not sustainable for the long run for the United States workers and what they need. And something that's also not sustainable is anything having to do with Elon Musk. Yeah, because right now the DOJ has sued SpaceX, and they did that yesterday, alleging that Musk's company discriminates, which is something we've seen and heard before. But this time it's about their hiring practices against refugees and people granted asylum in the United States. This lawsuit in particular, it seeks to win fair consideration and back pay for asylees and refugees who were deterred or denied employment at SpaceX due to the alleged discrimination, as well as the government wants some civil penalties and policy changes from the company. This from CNBC. The DOJ has been investigating SpaceX since June 2020 when the department's immigrant and employee rights section received a complaint of employment discrimination from a non-US citizen. The lawsuit says between 2018 and 2022, SpaceX wrongly claimed that export control laws limited its hiring to US citizens and lawful permanent residents. Yeah, that seems to be problematic in terms of saying there's a limit here. We do know that Kristen Clark, the Assistant Attorney General of DOJ Civil Rights Division, said in this following in the investigation. We're going to slide 3. Our investigation found that SpaceX failed to fairly consider or hire asylees and refugees because of their citizenship status and imposed what amounted to a ban on their hire, regardless of their qualification in violation of federal law. Clark added that the DOJ investigation found SpaceX recruiters and high-level officials took actions that actively discourage asylees and refugees from seeking work opportunities at the company. According to data SpaceX provided, the DOJ said that over a nearly 4-year period and across more than 100,000 hires, the company hired only one individual who was an asylee and identified as such in his application. That definitely sounds like SpaceX is limiting its hiring. And it's funny because we know with Elon Musk's other company, Tesla, that they have some issues with discrimination in their hiring practices and their workplace treatment because we know of all the lawsuits and the settlements that have happened there. Brett, are you surprised?
I've never seen this kind of a thing as a claim. You guys are refusing to hire asylees. This is like when you see a new thing in a report and you're like, I guess I should be mad at that. Like, I mean, I think that's just a natural response I have where it's like, I didn't know this was a metric that people usually function by. So I always like hesitate to jump in and be like, I'm mad at this thing I've never heard of before. But then you think about it and like when a lot of the people on the right wing who are like on the libertarian side are always say like, oh, you know, what you do, look at all these people that came from these other countries to America looking for a leg up and you gotta work hard and do everything you can and you'll make it to the top. Like that is exactly what they should be behind when it comes to asylees from refugees from other countries. People come here trying to do exactly the thing you guys said. And it's almost a cliche by now when you say like this guy was an top of his class engineer at the nation he came from and he came here and he couldn't get a job. And when they talk about which kinds of immigrants they want when you're on the like kind of racist right, they say we want the engineers and we want the people like that to come in and make science better in America. Well, put your money where your mouth is. Why don't you hire them? I think you need more than these kinds of stats. You need actual cases so you can compare people side by side to see if someone was really qualified. But yeah, life's hard enough being someone who had to leave their homeland because their country went to crap, probably because of something America did to it. So I think they should have a little bit softer a landing when they get here in all scenarios.
Yeah. And it definitely seems that the US Attorney's Office Civil Rights Division, where I used to work, that they do have the evidence there showing that these individuals were qualified, otherwise they wouldn't have brought the suit. But also when you have 10,000 applications and you hired one, like get the hell out of here. You can't tell me there's not discrimination going on, especially also why apply to SpaceX of all places? And it shows you that the individuals who are probably applying are probably science-minded people who had to flee their countries. And if we are gonna have laws that are protecting people, we should have them and actually enforce them. But God forbid the United States do that. But also God forbid we not head into our next chapter, the aftermath, sharing with you all sorts of incredible knowledge. Brett, are you ready for our next round?
Yeah, just one more thing is that like in these scenarios, like we were talking about earlier about people not getting paid wages in a lot of gig companies, like that's an argument for universal health care so that, people at least don't die in the meantime. Anyways, we'll see you all in the aftermath. Thanks for watching and like and subscribe. Happy National Dog Day, Dragon Squad. Thanks, Cray Cray Souffle. Happy Friday, Dragons. Thanks, California Dragon. Cheeseboro, according to Stock, says sounds like a crappy Shark Tank product pitch. This is called the Cheese Bro from the makers of the fondue buddy. Cheesecake Brownie says, I wonder how many times they retook the mugshot until he found the one he likes. Practicing the look in a mirror paid off. I never laughed so hard as I did at that picture. Fantastic.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.